Yeah, today I want to do a video talking about the differences between a quartz watch and a mechanical watch. And these are obviously your two most, the common types of watches, watch movements that are out there. On this side here, we've got 3 examples of quartz watches, and then over here I've got 2 examples of a mechanical watch. So, of course, these being the 2 analog quartz and that being a digital, so similar to a G-Shock with a digital display. But they are all 3 quartz watches, and these 2 being mechanical. This one being a hand-wound mechanical watch, and then this one here being an automatic. So first, before I go too far into the breaking these down, I just want to kind of explain like how these operate or how they work in simple terms. Of course, you can go into crazy detail with these things. There's books written about the subject. But in simple terms here, your quartz, the way it works, the quartz movement, is you have an electronic current that is pulled from a battery, and that can either be like a physical battery, like a button style battery, or it could be from a stored battery bank like a solar watch. But you have a battery that sends a electronic current through a quartz crystal, and as that crystal oscillates at a very precise rate, that's what provides the timekeeping ability on a quartz. What that does is it's extremely accurate just how that does that. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have mechanical watches, and instead of being driven by electricity, they're driven purely through a spring. So you have a mainspring that you wind up either by hand or, in the case of this one here, automatic, which is wound through your movement with a rotor. That winds the mainspring, which in turn drives the action of the watch. But that's kind of just simple terms on how the difference between the two. But I kind of want to go through some of the differences between how these things work. So the first thing I want to talk about is accuracy. And that is something that the quartz watch is known for, and it's always going to win. Even the really cheap quartz watches are just going to be extremely more accurate in most cases than your mechanical watches. For instance, this watch here, which is a Phoebus 300-meter dive watch, this one here averages about +1 to +3 seconds a month, which is very accurate. And then you have something like this that averages about +5, +6, and then this one about, again, around 4 or 5 seconds a month plus per month on that one. So your accuracy is extremely accurate. These are almost set and forget. You could set your watch, and as long as your battery is in good shape, you may never have to even adjust that time, except for maybe once or twice a year, maybe at daylight savings, when the hour changes. But they're pretty much set and forget. Now, your mechanical watches, the highest end stuff out there, you're going to see probably between plus or minus 5 seconds a day. So quite a difference. So instead of months, we're talking about quartz, we're now talking about days. This particular watch, these 2 are running about +10 to +20 a day. So, and these are Vostok watches, they're Russian watches, so they're not considered a very high-end movement here. But say like a Rolex or some other really high-end movement that's known for their timekeeping, you're going to still probably gain between 1 and 5 seconds a day, or minus. Usually you want to prefer to be fast and slow, but they're going to be like I said, plus or minus 5 seconds a day for your highest end mechanical watches. Your cheaper mechanical watches are going to be as bad as 30 seconds a day, could be up to a minute a day, 60 seconds a day. Some are even worse than that. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're looking for accuracy, quartz is the way to go. Now, we're also going to talk about durability here. Durability is, I think both watches have proved to be very durable. Your quartz or mechanicals are going to be very durable. However, your quartz are going to handle shock a lot better. The reason is, just think about it, this is going to be driven off a bunch of springs and gears, whereas this does have some gears, but the amount of moving parts is far less in a quartz watch than it is on a mechanical. So, for instance, this watch here, banging it on a table like this, it's not going to affect the timekeeping at all. It's not going to affect anything on a quartz watch. They're just made with fewer parts, and shock and impact really doesn't affect quartz watches too much. Your mechanicals are going to be, of course, very durable. They last a lifetime, but shocks. So if I take this watch and I just bang it real hard on something, there's a good chance you're going to affect the timekeeping. And that's just the nature of the beast with mechanical watches. Not saying one is better than the other, but for me, most of the times I prefer to wear a quartz when I'm working because I'm working with heavy equipment. I have a CNC machine, there's hammers. When I manufacture weapons, there's a good chance I'm going to be banging my watch quite often, which is why I like to have a quartz watch most of the time when I'm working. If I'm going out on the weekend or something like that, I'm going to probably prefer a mechanical watch. But there's pluses and minuses to both, but I wanted to talk about the durability. In my opinion, the quartz is more durable of the two, while the mechanical is also very durable. You do have to worry about impact and shock, like I mentioned, as well as magnetism. That's another thing I need to talk about. With anything that's going to be spring-driven, if you get a watch highly magnetized, you're also going to affect the reliability of the timekeeping in that too. Quartz, not as much as well. So now let's talk about maintenance. Maintenance on these, on quartz, there's really not much maintenance, with them, obviously. The only thing you're going to have to do is replace your battery from time to time. Some cheap watches, quartz watches, you may have to change your batteries as often as once a year. Some of them, maybe every 5 years. Of course, there's also the solar watches, which have a little stored battery inside, and those, theoretically, you don't have to ever change your battery on them. It's just recharged through the sun, but eventually, the capacity drains the older the battery gets, and, say after 10 years, you're going to start, you might have some issues with that, but that's really the only maintenance you're going to have to do on a quartz watch is replacing the battery. So you just need to know how to do it. Like, for instance, on this watch here, it's not a screw back crown, and you have to have a case back opener to pop that off. You have to be careful because you're opening up your case, to put it back correctly, as you can not get the case back on there correctly and maybe get water in your watch or something like that. But that's really all the maintenance you have to do on a quartz watch. The mechanicals, there's a little bit more. It depends on the brand. Like the Vostok says, you might want to have them sent to someone that can work on watches to regulate them again. Maybe every 10 years. They'll do like a watch maintenance kind of thing, kind of like like a 50,000 mile checkup on your vehicle. It's similar to that with a mechanical watch. It'll continue running. Like say if this watch is 10 years old, it's going to continue running, but the longer you go without routine maintenance to them, the accuracy is probably going to drop on them. Like Rolex, I think they've now gone to 10-year intervals between their recommended maintenance. So that kind of gives you an idea that you might have to have these things serviced every 10 years or something like that. Some watches maybe as short as 1 or 2 years. I think kind of the industry standard is between 5 and 10 for most mid-range to high-end mechanical watches. But that is something you need to realize is when you buy a mechanical watch, yes, you don't have to ever change your battery on them, but you do have to still maintain them by servicing them at specified time periods. So just keep that in mind. And the price on that can get pretty expensive. Obviously a quartz watch, a battery is just maybe $1 or $2. Your mechanical watches, if you just send it to the guy at the local mall or something like that, he might charge you, $50 or something like that. But Rolex, if you have like a Rolex and you send it into Rolex to get serviced, you expect quite a bill to come back in the mail. I've heard reports of some watches costing well over $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000 just for their service. So keep that in mind. Now price is another thing we need to talk about. Typically your quartz watches are going to be cheaper overall than mechanical watches. There are cheap mechanical watches which in my opinion are just really poor watches. I mean, the timekeeping is terrible on them. But in most cases, your mechanical watch is going to be more expensive. And the reason is it's more labor and more parts go into them. It takes more actual labor to assemble the watch, and they're also typically higher quality pieces. So again, it depends on the brand, but typically, for instance, like a Omega or Rolex or some other mid-range to high-end watch, you're paying for quality of the components here. So price, quartz are typically going to be your cheaper option. Mechanical are going to be slightly more. the last thing I want to talk about is the horological significance. So this here, like mechanical timepieces, to me are more an investment. Quartz watches are just kind of basically what I consider beater watches, or not throwaway, but these things are going to at some point die. There are reports of quartz watches lasting 30, 40 years. I think they came out originally in the late 60s, early 70s, and there's still examples of those that work fine, but in most cases you might get, say, 20 years out of a quartz watch before you start having issues, and that's just because the electronics just degrade over time. Whereas your mechanical watches, if you maintain them, I mean, they can last generations. It could be an investment piece that you buy and pass down to your kids or grandkids, and that's important. A lot of people just prefer them. They're just more elegant. It feels different on your wrist than, say, a quartz. I mean, the most easy thing to spot is the ticking of the movement. So, your quartz, you're going to get that quartz ticking that everybody rips on, that slow, just tick, 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 whereas your mechanical watches beat at a certain beats per minute, and they can go as high as over 30,000 beats per minute. So you get that nice sweep of the hand, which that's just ingrained in us that means a quality watch. So that's just something to keep in mind here. If you're looking for investment pieces, mechanical is always going to win in that regard. But again, I don't want to make this video too long. We could talk about this, literally for an hour. But I just kind of wanted to just throw out a few, points here on some of the differences between the two different types of movements here. For me, I probably wear quartz more. And again, that's just my line of work. Maybe for you, you'd be better off with the mechanical. If I have to pick or choose, I do probably prefer mechanical movements overall. But in my line of work, for what I do right now, quartz is it for me. It just fits. It checks all the boxes. All those points that I made earlier, that fits perfectly for me. But anyway, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on these two types of movements, which ones y'all prefer, why you prefer one or the other, maybe some pros and cons of each that I missed, I did not list here in this video. Maybe you could continue the discussion down below. But anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you'll have a good day.